advising clients across the country. Here he is, your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Welcome back to Something More with Chris Boyd for our second hour of the program. Thanks for being with us. And we're talking about a variety of things today. If we get a chance, we'll talk a little bit about evaluating your financial advisor, some thoughts for thinking about that. But we started off the end of last segment talking about Medicare reforms that are being proposed by the president that Jeff had. And by the way, I'm here with Jeff Perry. Sorry about that.
I'm still here. Yep. I made it through the news.
Yep. So Jeff, let's kind of go through this a little bit more. You touched all these hot button topics that I
did it on purpose.
Jumped out of my chair on, and we just moved on. Tell everyone again, really, what we were talking about.
So we're talking about Medicare, and just like Social Security, that we went into some detail before the break about, Medicare is struggling and keeping up the ability to pay Medicare out of the premiums that come out of taxes, to it, payroll taxes, et cetera. So to put it in perspective, Medicare spending last year was $689 billion, or 10% of the federal budget. So it's not a small number. And if you believe the projections, Medicare is expected to grow to $1.8 trillion by 2031. And that is due to the increases in healthcare, which we all see through our insurance and our own experiences, and more people on Medicare because of the demographics of the country, right? You got more people who are eligible and living longer, and all those things that are putting pressure on Social Security. So the President Biden, as part of his 2024 budget, has sought to, I'm not going to be cynical, has sought to put a proposal out there on how he would solve the Medicare issue, and that would be to raise taxes. And the plan would increase the net investment income tax from 3.8% to 5%. Let's
review what that is for people. This was sometimes referred to as the Obamacare surtax, or
it came up in the Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare. Yeah.
It essentially, although it's intended to help, fund Medicare, it comes up when people have income in excess of around 200,000 or 250 for couples.
Correct.
And there, whether it's capital gains or activity like that they can bump into this, but it ends up adding an additional tax. So it's a tax beyond your income tax, but it is ultimately taxed on your income and capital gains and things of that sort.
I think people correctly call it a surtax, like a tax added to the tax.
Yeah.
Which I don't know why they just didn't change the rate, but
right. Well, it's more palatable to call it a surtax than change the rate. And so in any case, so 3.8 to 5% is what they're talking about here. Okay.
And that would create another category above the 200 and 250 numbers that you mentioned in President Biden's proposal.
Oh, I see. So it's for those people who earn more than 400 or whatever.
Correct.
Have that expense.
And that includes regular income, capital gains. And here's the one that made you want to extend it to the next segment here. The so-called, I wish we had some evil music to play, so-called pass-through business income, which is nothing. Go ahead, Chris.
So if you own a business and you have a subchapter S kind of business, your earnings of your business the profit passes through to your personal tax return. So this would just essentially be anything that passes through, you're saying, or
it's rhetoric. They didn't have to say that. They could just say business income, but they use this term. The people who want to demonize people who make more than the average income, right? There's those evil wealthy people who hire people and give them jobs. See, I said I wasn't going to get cynical. And I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they use this
Sometimes
term
can help
pass through like it's some secret nefarious method. And
avoidance. Like it's an avoidance of
it
tax.
isn't an avoidance.
Just of putting it onto your personal tax return as opposed to your paying for it through the business.
Which has been that way for decades. I don't even know when Chapter S came up, but it's been as long as I've been around.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yeah, a long time. So in any case, yeah, it does make people a little crazy when you, or at least me.
So it's a tax. It's another tax. It's an increase in a surtax. It's an increase in a tax increase designed to offset the 2024 budget to make it look as if they are reducing the deficit, which even with this in it, it's a good note. I have not read or seen the details of the president's budget. They are not out at the time we're airing this. In the next days, they'll be more talked about. But the projections that have been on the news is that even with this increase in taxes, that the budget deficit in the proposal will be an additional $3 trillion. So back to that, right? The national debt is now, our national debt is more than our gross domestic product in the last few years, which is, this is more of a conversation to get Brian back on, because I think he and I have an interesting divergence on this, but a nation cannot sustain itself when our debt is annually more than our gross domestic product. And it takes and with higher interest rates.
Yeah, that cost is going to keep going higher.
It's not just for mortgages and car loans. It is credit cards. It is the nation's. You see these bond rates going up. That means the United States is paying more on the debt, which is more than it's ever been. So,
Jeff, this is something that comes up a lot. I mean, I think it's tending to come up more than it has in recent years, where people often will ask, well, where's the tipping point? How much debt can we accumulate before it becomes a problem? And the problem is it's not a linear response. It's dynamic. And there's a variety of factors that will answer that. And it's essentially not attainable. There is at some point, but everyone believes it's much farther away from where we are today, that it's not our current concern, that kind of thing. And so again, you get into the politics of dealing with our national debt. It's much more palatable for people to say, yeah, you can have that benefit, and we'll figure out how to pay for that later.
I agree with that statement. There's a lot in between where we are today and collapse, right? The tipping point. There is a point where the dollar becomes not the standard currency if our debt is so high. There is a point where we can't meet our obligations as we have them now. And I don't mean that we'd stop making our payments on our debt, but other things we just talked about Social Security and Medicare, and we could talk about veterans benefits. We could talk about other things. We could talk about military spending. We could talk about aid to the states. We could talk about infrastructure. There is a point when the debt payment is so large that taxes go up to meet it and kill our economy, or that we have to say, well, we can't do these things
things we think we want to do otherwise.
Right. So there's a lot in between there, but with a potential recession, slowing economy, meaning slowing growth, and higher interest rates, that discussion is appropriate to have, because both of those things accelerate those other things that we're talking about, anything from reducing spending to total collapse, because GDP won't be growing at the pace of inflation. So we're losing ground on that as well. So I think that's what's driving the increased discussions, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. That kind of brings me to a topic I wanted to take a minute to talk about. And that is the notion that aid to Ukraine has become controversial. There are people advocating to not send as much, or the support that we've been sending. to Ukraine. And I just I don't get it. And I want to talk about it just for a minute, but maybe it relates to these kind of fiscal concerns. But um,
Well, that's the posture that it's being put in. I'm not saying it's sincere or legitimate. It's legitimate, but I'm not saying it's sincere, right?
yeah, yeah.
The no
My,
blank check kind of thing, right?
my point ultimately is it's in U.S. strategic interest to support Ukraine, to prevent Russia from being emboldened in its intentions to reexert influence and dominance over Eastern Europe. It is in our strategic interest as it relates to our posture with China. There's a ripple effect here. It's relevant for us for how we're perceived by our allies. There's like numerous layers of why this would be detrimental to U.S. Strategic interests. I think to let to not offer what support we can in Ukraine's effort to retain its independence and autonomy from an invasion from Russia. So that's that's my take. I think I think it's very much connected to the China stresses and strains we keep hearing about this last couple of weeks, where about our relationship and the potential tensions and the potential for China's interest in retaking Taiwan and so forth. And I think that's something we'll want to talk about in the future. I know it's not necessarily today's in-depth discussion,
Well,
but
it's important because it's part of all the things that we've been talking about. They're all interrelated, and for the many of these voices, some of these voices, and they are a minority. Let's be clear, they're a minority currently. The voices who want to consider decreasing our support for Ukraine. I just asked these people, have they studied world history at all? Because this is a point that the United States and the world has been in for millenniums, that we have a aggressive totalitarian dictator who is attempting to take additional territory they have no right to. And history is full of times when the alliance to stop them was non-existent or weak. And the aftermath of those decisions not to stop something, not to stop a cancer, in this case, Russia from taking Ukraine or China from taking Taiwan, if you don't stop the cancer at the beginning, when you have the opportunity to, it will spread and it will take over the entire body or Europe or Asia. And so we have an opportunity to support a growing ally, Ukraine, and support the best hope for long-term democracy in Europe, NATO, which is amazingly strong and together.
yeah,
And to fight, it's a proxy war. You can call it that. It's not a nice term, but it is a proxy war, and it's sadly, disturbing, killing, maiming thousands, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian people. But if it's not stopped there, Putin has said he wants to reunite the USSR.
yeah.
So
Effectively.
there's no reason to think that he's going to stop there if he's successful. And to your point, the president of China is watching how NATO and the world responds. And if we fail, we collectively fail to stop Putin there, President Xi in China will logically be emboldened to reunite, as he would say, Taiwan to China. And that war is so much more difficult and has so much more dynamic and has so many more threats to the United States than supporting Ukraine. And there's only two ways to support someone in a war, all in or not. And we need to be all in, and if the United States and our allies are all in Ukraine, giving them what they need and supporting them with intelligence, Russia, it's proven, by the last year of Russia's failure and inability to execute the war, we can stop it, and the world and the United States will be better off for it. And for those members of my party who don't think that that's a good idea, they need to go back to the history books and look at what's happened. And you don't need to go back centuries. You can go back, you can go back 100 years, and you can see two wars that could have been stopped in Europe early that weren't. and the United States owns some of that because we did not get involved early. And well, I guess that's my rant for this
Yeah, we
afternoon.
see it. We see it very much the same way, and I appreciate the chance to just try to make that point and encourage people to revisit this support of this this movement of questioning whether we're going to be uh, continuing our support of Ukraine. I get it that the question of where we want to help people at home, and can we do we want our money going overseas? There's lots of ways you can question where our money goes in foreign aid and so forth. I get it. But a lot of that is strategic in intent, and nature abhors a vacuum, and if you don't fill that space, who will? And I think that's the kind of thing we don't always think about when we reflexively say, that we don't want to pursue some course of action when it comes to helping governments sometimes we don't particularly like. In this case, that's not the case, though.
It's not the case.
So,
And some attempt to poke their argument with previous corruption in Ukraine. And, you're never going to find a perfect ally. Every nation has problems. Our own country has problems. We have problems
right.
of civil unrest and riots and racial problems and all these, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have allies if we were to have a problem. So we agree, it's in our best interest, and there's only two ways to fight a war: winning or losing. All in or half in. And when you're half in, you don't win.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with our next segment. One of the things that we've been wanting to talk about, or I thought would be interesting, I got an interesting article from our friend Mike Perna, a former participant in asset management resources, recently retired. He, at least from AMR, he mentioned that he found this interesting article and wanted to share it. I thought there were some interesting parts of it. One was about how you evaluate your financial advisor. So I thought maybe we could kind of go through that for a minute or two to see if there's helpful tidbits for people in that. Stay with us right after this. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for being with us. I'm Chris Boyd, certified financial planner practitioner. I'm here with Jeff Perry. We are both of Asset Management Resources. And Jeff, one of the things that I wanted to spend some time on was this article that Mike Perna sent along, where in it was embedded this content about helping some questions to help people evaluate their financial advisor. Do they have the right fit? And, finding the right financial advisor is, without question, very difficult. I had some people in my office the other day, and they came in and they said, well, we did some homework before we came to see you.
That's good.
Yeah, I was like, okay, that was good.
Yeah.
They said, well, we saw there weren't any blemishes. You didn't have anything that was reported as a problem. So that was at least something. There's no helpful way to evaluate, how do I know if this is a good advisor or not? But they said, and we liked that you tended to work with retirees because they were in retirement. But it's very difficult to find a tool to say, well, what do you?
Were they looking for a Google review, or what do you think
they were looking for a Morningstar report or something? You know what I mean? Like some analysis of
some third party rating.
Right. So with that,
but you just got 5 stars. You just got a recognition. I know you didn't want to talk about it, but you talked about the ratings.
Well, thanks for mentioning it. And Jeff Tomaning, who is on our team, has gotten this recognition for 10 years. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. What was the 5-star
wealth recognition advisor? Yeah. So that's something to be proud of. And so
I didn't even think to mention that to them at the time.
You're way too humble, Mr. Boyd. You get this recognition and you don't even remember it.
It wasn't
that long ago.
No, I just didn't think of it as like the tool that they were looking for, but I probably should have suggested that. Um, in any in
Sorry.
any case, well, thanks for mentioning it. Though. I do appreciate.
Sure, you don't mean that. Go ahead.
Uh, so let's look at some of the things that if you are entertaining a change or even evaluating your own advisor,
Yep.
are they doing some of the things you might suggest? This is from do you remember what the source of this article was,
I
Jeff?
don't, but I don't.
I think it was from Smart Asset.
Yeah, I have some notes, but I didn't write the source.
Well, yeah, here's a few of the kind of questions they suggested that you might want to be looking at. Do they listen well?
Well, I'm going to say, do they listen, right?
Yeah.
If you
How
go
often
in,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
if you go in and meet with an advisor or anyone that you want to help you, a lawyer, an accountant, whoever, one of your professionals, and they're talking more than listening and telling you what you should do and how they're going to help you.
They're selling you something.
They're selling you. Yeah.
So, I mean, and the good analogy is you go to the doctor, you come in to your visit, and the doctor says, "I have a great prescription for you. Have you considered using this?" Not the way it works, right? You want,
I hope not. Maybe.
you probes, how are you feeling? How are things going? What's on your mind or whatever, right? That's your doctor, but whatever it is, they're asking, assessing, evaluating, then they come up with an answer. So are they listening to you? Do they listen well?
I will say one kind of side note to that, and I agree, listen well. But a lot of people, when they come into the office, they expect us to make recommendations quicker, if you will. Like, well, we've talked for 10 minutes. What do you think I should do?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. And we just for our listeners that you probably know, we've talked about it before, but we have a multi meeting process where we start with a conversation. We call it the About You meeting. We have a whole meeting, and it's usually an hour to hour and a half, sometimes even longer, but really just want to get to know what's going on with you, not only your financial statements and, your current investments and things, but also, we want to understand what's family dynamics, what's troubling you, where you find,
what are your goals? What are your dreams? Your fears, right?
Aspire to, right?
Yeah.
And cash flows, and where's money coming from? Where's it going to? So trying to get a handle on the whole picture, because all of these moving parts can affect, what's the answer to how we should be invested, as an example.
Right.
So, yeah. And then we come back with a second appointment where we do more talking, I guess, at that point.
Sure. After we know you, right? After we get a clear picture of how we can best serve you.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next question in this article was, do their recommendations align with your personal goals and values? Just what we're talking about.
Does it make sense? All right.
You want to put it in the context of this bigger picture.
Well, I'm going to take a shot as an example, but if you go to a financial advisor, quote unquote, and they're not a fiduciary, meaning they don't have your best interest at heart, they're a salesperson for a certain product, they're going to find a recommendation that is within their product line, whether it be an annuity or a loaded mutual fund. You need to pick someone who isn't trying to sell you something, but is trying to give you the best possible advice, and isn't, in my opinion, you can disagree, I don't think you will, but who isn't based, their fee, their income is not based upon what they sell you specifically.
I think that's fair. I mean, that I wouldn't want to say that someone who is paid through commissions can't be objective or give good counsel. I wouldn't go that far, but I do think your interests are more aligned when there's more of a potential for a conflict of interest, that someone really wants you to be sold the product because they need the commission, as opposed to someone who's offering a service and there's a fee for that service.
There are definitely good people in the business who are paid on commission and give good advice, but I'd rather get advice for someone who isn't paid based on me solely selecting a certain product, than someone who's giving me advice that isn't based on compensation, isn't based solely on that advice.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple other questions they're asking is, do you understand your financial plan and how is it helping you reach, and how it is helping you reach your goals? I think a lot of times when we work with a financial advisor of one type or another, have you ever had this, Jeff, where you've had someone come in and you feel like, even though they're not literally doing this, there might be walnuts on the table and they're just shuffling which one has the thing underneath it,
Yeah, sure.
you feel like it's a little bit of a flim flam, like you start getting questions and you don't quite understand it, and they explain it and you still don't really understand it. So
Well, yeah.
generally I would say that's something where you really have to question. If you don't get it, don't feel compelled to proceed.
Well, one of the things I love about how you do the presentations and the follow-up meetings and the annual reviews and the client interaction is, you were a teacher.
Yeah.
Like a long time ago. And I've said and believe that a financial planner advisor should have the heart of a teacher.
I think that's very true. Yeah.
You're relying on the professional. So, the doctor, the lawyer, the accountant, the financial advisor to give you the advice, give you guidance, keep you accountable, whatever it is. But you want, back to your doctor example, if he's saying, well, I suggest that you should have your left leg removed, you really want to know why, not
True.
right?
Could you explain that to me a little quick?
Yeah, could you explain why that's in my best interest?
Yeah.
Not that you make money removing my left leg.
Yeah.
Like, joking around a little bit here, but
but that's very true. You want a clear explanation as to
like,
what's
how's
happening,
this fit in,
why,
right?
and why it makes sense this is the proper course of action, right?
Client should, with any professional, they should, if they don't understand, they should ask for an explanation, like why should I remove my left leg? Why should I buy this?
And that brings us to the next one. Are they responsive and helpful when you ask questions? Sometimes if an advisor is getting like agitated or belligerent or tries to belittle your question, that's a sign of something that is not a good fit.
Now, you don't want a Bernie Madoff who says, if you're going to ask me questions, I'm not going to do business with you.
I'm taking it away.
Right.
There are sales techniques that do that, where people try to entice you by taking something away. Are they helping you with the entire financial situation and not just the investment portfolio? Are your investment returns in line with the market or benchmark kind of an approach, given your personal balance between risk and return? Is it a good
very,
fit?
very important, right? Not just performance.
More often,
right.
Spend a lot of time talking about this. I had recently had an appointment with people, and their risk assessment, their questionnaire we use, it came out with more an expectation of more risk than one that their portfolio implied presently. And I just was questioning, is this really how you feel? Is this really what you want? And the more we talked about it, the more it became sort of a revelation that, well, everybody wants higher returns, but maybe I don't want as much of that decline risk in the future as maybe I was thinking I did, to make the most of it, that kind of thing. So really important to spend time.
Good to sleep at night.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And then, are they looking to the future? Are they helping you anticipate future needs? On a gut level, do you trust them?
Right.
Just as something, or is there a bell ringing? But anyway, and then, do you feel more secure because of their guidance? This was just.
I've got one more that I have to throw in.
May not be all of them, but I thought this was kind of an interesting little group.
I've got one more that I think should be in every professional you speak with. How are they compensated?
That should be a question you ask.
It should be a question, whether whoever it is. I mean, if you have health insurance and you're going to the doctor, you get it, right? But if you're dealing with a financial professional, the two questions that I always say all the time.
And in line with that is, and what are the fees?
That's right.
Deal with. So it's not purely about their compensation, but what are my costs? What are my fees?
Yep. And I think any professional who's upfront, if you say, how are you compensated? They'll tell you right up front. It shouldn't be a mystery. It shouldn't be a 40-minute speech and somewhere in the middle is half an answer. It should be, we are compensated blank.
Yeah.
Right. And that's easy. And that's it. If you don't get that, I say, if you don't get the fiduciary answer, ask them if they're a fiduciary.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't easily explain how they're compensated, all the other stuff is really in question.
Recommendations or whatever comes into question. Yeah.
To me, it is.
I think that's a fair point. All right. Well, anyway, thanks for indulging me. I thought that was, there were some interesting things in there. I thought it was worth taking a few minutes to talk.
Nice to hear from Mike.
That was great.
I hope he's enjoying more of his leisure time.
Well, he's still doing his tax practice. So
also not yet.
So he's not right now. Yeah.
Well, after April 15th, Mike, if you're listening, take some time for you and your family to kick back. You've earned some leisure time.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd, Financial Talk Show.
Asset Management Resources, LLC, and J. Christopher Boyd, CFP, provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is in the nature of general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. AMR, LLC cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.